You stood at a hospital desk for 4 minutes. What you said when you left cost me my marriage, my career, my apartment, and 11 months of my daughter's childhood. I know you remember me. Not from that night specifically. Not from the bay where you stood at the foot of my bed and handed me a cup of water. But you remember me, because my name on that intake form meant something to you outside that hospital. And that is where this story begins. Within 6 months of that night my marriage was over. My job was gone. My daughter was asking me questions I couldn't answer. You need to hear what that cost. My name is Maya Reeves. Before you stood at that desk I had everything I had spent a decade building. A marketing director position, a team of 11 people, 3 industry awards, a marriage, a 6-year-old daughter named Lily who had just lost her first tooth and wanted the money in quarters because she decided to start a collection. I had a life, a specific, deliberately built life. I grew up in Dayton watching my mother work 2 jobs alone. Day shift at a medical billing office. 2 evenings a week at a dry cleaning counter. She never once made us feel like a burden for needing her to do it. She made it look like love. I understand now that it was love. But it was also exhaustion and sacrifice and the daily discipline of a woman who had decided her children would not feel the precariousness she felt. I learned from her. I learned that you build things carefully. That you maintain them. That you do not take for granted the stability you have constructed. I was not careless with what mattered. I want you to understand that about me before you understand what you were careless with. That Thursday night I came to your hospital for something private. Something that was mine. And you stood at that desk and you saw my name and something clicked. We had met once, briefly, at a birthday party 3 years before. That was enough. You knew someone who knew someone who knew someone in my life. And you talked, not maliciously. I have thought about that a lot and I do not believe you did it maliciously. You did it the way people do most damage, casually. As something interesting to say. As the detail that made the conversation worth having. And then you went home. 3 weeks after you stood at that desk, David came home on a Wednesday evening. He put his bag down. He looked at me, and I knew from the quality of that look that something had changed. He said, "I need to ask you something." He told me what he'd heard. Not who he'd heard it from. What? The specific medical information I hadn't told him yet because I was still figuring out how to say it. Because it was mine to tell. In my own time. In my own way. And now he knew. Not from me. From the network your conversation had traveled through in 3 weeks. I want you to understand what it feels like to have your husband learn something about your own body from a source that is not you. It's not just that he found out. It's how he found out. With the specific betrayal of someone who was supposed to be first and was instead one of the last. David was not a perfect husband. I was not a perfect wife. We had the tensions of 2 people working demanding jobs while raising a child. We had arguments. We went through periods of being more roommates than partners. We did the uncomfortable work of a real marriage, 2 people choosing each other even when choosing was hard. We were in the middle of that work when you stood at that desk. And what you handed to the network cracked something in the foundation of what we had built. Not the information itself. The how. The fact that he found out from strangers before he found out from me. That is what he could not unfold from his mind. That is what kept returning. That is what the 8 months of counseling could not fully reach. It wasn't enough. In June, David moved out. Lily asked me why Daddy was living somewhere else. I didn't know what to say. 4 months after that Wednesday evening, what you shared reached my office. I don't know the exact path it traveled. What I know is that by February someone at Harmon and Reed knew. And the partners made a decision about me based on information I'd never chosen to share professionally, and that had nothing to do with my ability to do my job. I want you to understand what 7 years of building looks like before I tell you what losing it in a month looked like. I joined that firm in 2014 as their sole marketing coordinator. 1 person. A budget that barely covered a website update. By year 3 we had a brand identity that actually reflected who they were. By year 5 a website that won an industry design award. By year 7 a team of 11 people and a seat at the leadership table I had earned every inch of. 7 years. Built carefully. Maintained deliberately. Then the process started. The budget meetings I'd attended for 3 years, I stopped being invited. The projects I'd built my reputation on, quietly reassigned. My team of 11 slowly pulled away from me. They didn't fire me. They made it impossible to stay. I want you to feel the weight of what I had to do next. I had to walk into that building and clear my desk and hand back my keycard and smile, the specific smile of someone who is leaving with dignity, because dignity is the only thing left that belongs entirely to her. In March I resigned. 7 years. 3 awards. 11 people. Gone. Because you decided my name was interesting enough to share at the end of your shift. Then came the apartment. The short north. 2 bedrooms on the 4th floor. Lily's drawings on the refrigerator. The bookshelf David had built into the alcove. The kitchen where I'd cooked Thanksgiving dinner for 12 people 3 years in a row. It was the first place I had lived as an adult that felt completely like mine. Not a starter apartment. Not somewhere I was passing through on the way to somewhere else. A place I had decorated deliberately and lived in fully, and that had accumulated the specific texture of a life being lived inside it. When David left, the rent became mine alone. On one income. After losing my job, I took freelance work. I applied for positions below what I'd been doing because keeping Lily stable, keeping her in the same school, keeping her bedroom, that was the priority. I couldn't make it work. 3 months I tried to make it work. 3 months of spreadsheets and freelance invoices and the specific mathematics of a woman trying to hold a life together with whatever she has left. The numbers never closed. Every week I ran them again, hoping I had made an error. I had not made an error. In September, 11 months after you stood at that desk, I packed 11 years of my adult life into a moving truck and drove it to my mother's house in Dayton. I was 34 years old. Moving home. With my daughter. With nothing left except those boxes and a very specific kind of clarity about exactly what your conversation had cost me. The night before the truck came, Lily was asleep in the room with the purple wall she had chosen herself at age 4. She'd chosen it with the gravity of someone making a decision that would last forever. And it had lasted, through 2 repaints of every other room, through every conversation David and I had about whether it was time to change it. Because she had chosen it. And it was hers. And we did not change what was hers. I sat on the floor of the kitchen. Not in a chair. On the floor. Back against the cabinet under the sink. The apartment had been mostly packed, and when you pack an apartment the sound changes. The walls start reflecting differently. The space starts practicing being empty before you've finished leaving it. I sat there for a long time. I thought about my mother working 2 jobs in Dayton. I thought about 7 years at Harmon and Reed. I thought about David's face on that Wednesday evening. I thought about Lily's first tooth in the quarters. I thought about the specific sequence of events that ran from a desk in an emergency department to a moving truck in September. I thought about you standing at that desk. And then I got up. Because the truck was coming in the morning and Lily needed her breakfast packed and her stuffed rabbit needed to be in her backpack, not in a box. That is the part one need you to understand. Not the sitting on the floor. The getting up. I got up every single time. About 4 months after we moved to my mother's house, Lily came into the kitchen on a Tuesday morning. Sat at the table, 7 years old, and said, "Mommy, why did everything change?" I said, "Some things changed because grown-up things are complicated sometimes." She said, "Is it because you did something wrong?" "No, baby. I didn't do anything wrong." "Then why did it happen to you?" 7 years old. She had identified the central injustice of the previous year in one sentence and was asking me to explain it. I didn't have an answer. Not a real one. Not one adequate to what she asked. I said, "Sometimes people make mistakes and other people have to live with what those mistakes cost. And it is not fair. And I am sorry that some of what it cost landed on you." She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, "I don't care about the apartment, Mommy. I care about you." She is 9 now. She is okay. She has strong opinions about pasta and a yard she has claimed as an archaeological dig site, and she is, by every measure I have, okay. But she asked me that question. And you should know she asked it. You should have to sit with the fact that a 7-year-old asked it. I found out it was you on a Tuesday afternoon in January. Not from a confrontation. From a woman I'd known for years who mentioned your name the way you say the name of someone who is just a fact in a story, rather than the person responsible for everything the story cost. She said your name like it was information I already had. She said, "You knew that, right?" I said, "I had a sense." I drove back to Dayton. Sat in my mother's driveway for a long time. Thought about the legal options. The nursing board complaint. The professional consequences I could set in motion. I thought about all of it. And then I thought about what I actually wanted. Not what would punish you most. Not what would make the best case or generate the most accountability. Not the dramatic and visible version that would satisfy the people in my life who wanted me to do something dramatic and visible. What I actually wanted. And what I actually wanted was this. I wanted you to hear it. Not a letter filtered through legal language. Not a complaint processed through professional procedure. My voice. Telling you exactly what your conversation cost. Every piece of it. In order. Without being able to look away. So this is that. You don't get to look away. I want to tell you something about you before I finish. Not the version that shows up on shift and does the job correctly 98% of the time. The version that existed on that Thursday night. You are a good nurse. I mean that. 16 years. You have held hands during the worst moments of strangers' lives. You have delivered news that cannot be taken back. You have been the first face someone sees when they wake up in a frightening place and the steady presence they needed when everything else in the room was chaos. That is real and it matters, and I am not going to take it from you. But I want you to understand something about that night. You were tired. Long shift. The particular flattening of judgment that comes from doing emotionally demanding work for too many hours in a row. I know that. I have thought about that more than you deserve me to think about it. And then your shift ended. And you went home. And you had a conversation. A personal conversation. Away from the hospital. Not depleted anymore. Just a person talking to another person. And in that conversation you chose to use my name and my information as the interesting part. As the detail that made the story worth telling. And then you went home. And you slept. While I was losing my marriage. While I was being pushed out of my career. While I was sitting on the floor of my kitchen. While my daughter was asking me why everything changed. You went home and you slept. You never apologized. I know you know what you did. The guilt found its way back to me through the same network your conversation traveled. Not an apology. Just the knowledge, through the network, that you know. I thought about what to do with that for a long time. There is a version of me that wanted you to come to me with the full weight of what you understood. To say it directly and without qualification or self-justification. To look at me the way you did not look at me when you were standing at that desk and see me the way you did not see me then. I stopped waiting for that version. Not because I forgave you. Because waiting for an apology from someone who may never give one is the act of handing them your recovery. And I had already given you enough. My marriage, my job, my apartment, my daughter's bedroom, 11 months of my life. You do not get my recovery. My recovery is mine, completely. I live in Columbus again. 2-bedroom in Clintonville with good light and a yard Lily has claimed as her own. She's turning it into something between a garden and an archaeological dig site, which tells you everything you need to know about who she is. I have a consulting practice built from the reputation that survived your conversation because reputations built on 7 years of actual work are more durable than the people who try to damage them. 3 long-term clients. A waiting list. I am not married. I am okay. Both things are true at the same time and I am not going to apologize for either of them. But I came here to say one thing clearly. To you. And to anyone watching who handles private information about real people. My privacy was not a protocol you failed to uphold. It was the container that held everything I hadn't decided to share yet. The decisions I was still making. The conversations I was still working toward. The information about my own body and my own choices that belonged to me and that I had the absolute human right to share in my own time in my own way. You reached in without asking. You took something out. You handed it to someone else. And the container cracked. And everything that wasn't ready for the world came out at once. A marriage. A job. An apartment. A daughter's bedroom. From a container you had no right to open. The information is not yours. It doesn't become yours because you have access to it. It doesn't become yours because the person it belongs to isn't in the room. It doesn't become yours because you find it interesting. Treat it like it is not yours. Because somewhere there is a woman sitting on the floor of her kitchen the night before a moving truck comes. Don't be the reason she's there.